Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GBNews. Be there.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, as Suella Braverman, another darling of the Tory right, is eliminated from the leadership contest in a ballot, once again topped by fishy Rishi Sunak, is the clock ticking for MPs to prevent a pseudo-conservative from infiltrating number 10? I'll explore in my digest coming up before getting the thoughts of my superstar panel, Conservative Home columnist Emily Carver, former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and author and broadcaster Amy Nicol. With Liz Truss hoping her assured performance at her official campaign launch today shoots her up the rankings.
I'm loyal to Boris Johnson. I supported our Prime Minister's aspirations, and I want to deliver the promise of the 2019 manifesto.
Should Truss and Kemi Badenoch unite for a dream ticket to challenge Sunak and Mordaunt, my blockbuster lineup of political masterminds? Tory grandee David Mallor, former Conservative MEP David Bannerman, author and journalist Laura Dodsworth, Daily Telegraph columnist Tim Stanley, and Conservative councillor Joe Porter battle it out and reveal who they're backing in the clash at 9:25. Speaking of Mordaunt, she had an incredible day yesterday, but 24 hours is a long time in politics, and this morning one of Boris Johnson's biggest allies came out hard against her.
Do you think that she is the right person to fight the culture wars?
I think honesty, I think clarity, I think taking a position and sticking to it and defending it and not accommodating yourself to everyone else is what we're going to need.
So, will Lord Frost's grave concerns about the contest frontrunner derail her skyrocketing campaign? Associate editor of The Sun, Trevor Kavanagh, analyses at 10:20. And is the favourite candidate of Tory members just too woke to be PM? Political firebrand and former Tory Minister Anne Widdecombe will take a look at her rap sheet at 9:40. As Nicola Sturgeon today claims the democratic deficit north of the border is, quote, starker than ever ahead of the appointment of yet another Prime Minister Scotland hasn't voted for, her words. Is she wrong to exploit the Tory leadership contest for her independence push?
A Prime Minister with no democratic endorsement whatsoever from Scotland will be replaced by another Prime Minister that Scotland hasn't voted for, indeed wouldn't vote for, even if we were given the opportunity.
We'll debate scheming Sturgeon's comments and whether the candidates are overlooking the pressing issue of saving the union at 10. In the same week, the starting 11 on their talent-rich list is revealed to be all white. The BBC have some nerve broadcasting this.
Lionesses has secured their place in the quarter-finals, but all starting 11 players and the 5 substitutes that came onto the pitch were all white.
Surely it shouldn't matter. But are the BBC right to criticise the England women's football team, our brilliant Lionesses, for their lack of diversity? You can guess my thoughts, but we'll find out what my panel think at 10:30. Are woke Westerners ignorant of how good we've got it? Trigonometry podcast host Constantine Kisin has written a new book about growing up under Soviet rule that he hopes will cure our sort of terminal case of self-loathing in the West. He's tonight's Outsider at 9:50. And is free speech dead online? Now Elon Musk no longer wants to buy Twitter. Social media sensation, rapper and podcaster Zuby explains why you should care about the battle between the billionaire and big tech in Uncancelled at 10:40. Plus, are you ready to return to Middle Earth?
This could be the beginning of a new era.
Ooh, yes, we've been given our most in-depth look yet at the record-breaking Lord of the Rings TV series, so I'll bring you more of that in the Media Buzz in the next hour. Tomorrow's newspaper front page is on the way too, and the final Greatest Britain and Union Jackass of the week will be crowned at 10:50. This is Dan Wootton tonight. Let's go. Just one thing first, though. It's the final 5. The battle for PM is now down to this lot: Rishi Sunak, Penny Mordaunt, Kemi Badenoch, Liz Truss, and Tom Tugendhat. But breaking tonight, a major development in the last hour with the Daily Telegraph among those reporting that the ejected Attorney General Suella Braverman is now endorsing Truss for PM. So, should the right of the party, including Kavanagh, now unite behind the Foreign Secretary? My special digest on that next, then my superstar panel weigh in. It's the Conservative Home columnist Emily Carver tonight, alongside Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey and the broadcaster Amy Nicol. But before all of that, the latest news headlines at 9 with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you. The headlines tonight on GB News. Suella Braverman has told GB News there are no authentic Brexiteers left in the Tory leadership race. That's after the Attorney General was knocked out of the second round of voting in the race to replace Boris Johnson. There are now 5 candidates left battling it out to lead the Conservative Party and ultimately the country. The former Chancellor Rishi Sunak is still the front runner and the Trade Minister Penny Mordaunt is in second place. Further rounds of voting will continue next week until 2 candidates are left. Suella Braverman says she still hasn't decided who she's going to back, but there are rumours tonight she may come out in support of Liz Truss.
Was the only authentic Brexiteer in the contest. I'm going to have to look for someone who comes close to my credentials. Because we need to deliver on the Brexit promises, remove regulations, make sure people feel that they are better off and that it was worth it, and that Northern Ireland still remains part of the UK.
Well, meanwhile, the Labour leader says the Tories are fighting like cats in a bag. Sir Keir Starmer is calling for a general election.
We've set out our mission for an incoming Labour government, rebooting our economy, revitalising our public services and uniting our country. And that's why I say we should have a general election, time for real change. We've had 12 years of stagnation. A change of leader isn't going to change that. We need a change of government.
And some breaking news just coming to us within the last hour. Ivana Trump, the former wife of Donald Trump, has died at the age of 73. As we said, the ex-wife of the former President Donald Trump was the mother of his 3 eldest children, Don Jr., Ivanka and Eric. The couple divorced in 1992. Donald Trump confirmed on Twitter she'd passed away in her apartment in New York. Now, in international news, protesters in Sri Lanka have celebrated in the streets today after the resignation of their president, Gotabaya Rajapaksa. He fled to Singapore this week after demonstrators converged on his presidential palace. The unrest in Sri Lanka began as the country started running out of food, fuel and medicine. Strike action by Royal Mail managers has been suspended. Members of the Unite union had planned to strike over pay, jobs and conditions tomorrow. Instead, they're going to be balloted in the next few days on proposals aimed at resolving the row. But another rail strike is now taking place on the 30th of July. The ASLEF union says train drivers at 8 rail companies have all voted to walk out in a dispute over pay. It follows an announcement by RMT members they'll take strike action on the 27th of July. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. Now back to Dan Wootton tonight.
The knives are coming out in the battle to be PM. The next 4 days are going to be truly consequential, actually, both for the Conservative Party and the country. There is increasing pressure as we come to air tonight for the right to unite for a dream ticket of Foreign Secretary Liz Truss and former Equalities Minister Kavanagh. It comes after Spartan Brexiteer Suella Braverman, who was knocked out of the vote this afternoon, has tonight backed Truss. While new favourite Penny Mordaunt and Boris backstabber fishy Rishi Sunak remain out ahead, that could all change if the Brexit and anti-woke wing of the party comes together. In fact, look at this. The biggest jump today actually came for Truss, with her vote increasing 28%. Mordaunt rose 23%, Kavanagh 22% and Sunak only 14.8%. Crucially, The Brexiteer bloc jumped over 14% to 140 MPs. Now, that would actually be enough to guarantee a spot in the final two if the candidates unite. In a stunning intervention to start the day, former Brexit czar Lord David Frost, one of the most highly respected Tories whose endorsement has been highly coveted, swung behind Liz Truss in a bombshell interview where he slammed the ability of Mordaunt.
Have worked with Penny Mordaunt. What do you make of her as a potential Prime Minister?
Yeah, so I have worked with Penny. To be honest, I'm quite surprised that she is where she is in this leadership race. She was my deputy, notionally, more than really. I'm sorry to say this, that I felt she did not master the detail that was necessary in the negotiations last year. She wouldn't always deliver tough messages to the European Union when that was necessary, and I'm afraid she wasn't sort of fully accountable. She wasn't always visible. Sometimes I didn't even know where she was, and I'm afraid this became such a problem that after 6 months I had to ask the Prime Minister to move her on. But from the basis of what I saw, I'm afraid I would have grave reservations.
Whoa, that's what we call a mic drop moment. Now, a friend of Lord Frost went further tonight, telling the Daily Mail, while Suella, Kemi and Liz are all extremely good candidates on the right of the party, he thinks Liz Truss's evident determination to put Britain onto a new reforming free market economic path gives her the edge. He thinks it's time for all three to unite and make sure the members get a candidate who can deliver real economic reform and change. And tonight, Braverman, who was ejected this afternoon before endorsing Truss, told GB News that Tory members must get a genuine choice, given Fishy Rishi and Mordaunt are both on the left of the party. Watch.
Do you think that members would get a fair crack of the whip, a fair spread of ideological debate, if the final two candidates were Rishi Sunak and Penny Mordaunt?
Well, I would describe Penny as on the left of the party, and I mean, members do deserve a genuine choice, and I think it would be really important for someone who's, and I would describe Rishi to be on the left of the party as well. So I think it would be helpful for members to have a genuine choice, someone from the left and from the right.
Truss, meanwhile, used her launch today to frame herself as the reforming, free market, low tax, pro-Brexit candidate. And in my view, she wisely stood by Boris Johnson and his legacy.
I'm a loyal person. I'm loyal to Boris Johnson. I supported our Prime Minister's aspirations, and I want to deliver the promise of the 2019 manifesto. I have a plan to make Britain a high-growth economy over the next 10 years through bold supply-side reform. We will cut taxes, helping businesses invest in their future. We'll tackle the cost of energy and we'll control government spending. Our economy will not get back on track overnight. Times are going to be tough, but I know that I can get us on an upward trajectory by 2024.
So the next 3 days will be full of dirty tricks, dodgy dealing and dominant debate performances. All Tory MPs will be watching closely to see how their candidates perform on Channel 4 tomorrow night and ITV News on Sunday night, ahead of the next round of voting on Monday afternoon. If Truss passes those tests with flying colours, the pressure for Kavanagh to back her in exchange for a major role in her potential future cabinet, I think, will be overwhelming. There's one thing I can assure you tonight, though. There is still no certainty over who is going to replace Boris Johnson, and that is somewhat terrifying. But despite the media hysteria around Sunak and Mordaunt, let me tell you, there is still a strong chance that Truss could win this thing. But to respond now, my superstar panel, Conservative Home columnist Emily Carver, Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey and broadcaster Amy Nicol. So, Sean, you were a big Boris Johnson backer. Who are you backing now?
Listen, I've been speaking to the members of the party and the one overwhelming message that's come back is anybody but Rishi. I've been surprised at the sheer veracity that people have been saying. They've been anybody but Rishi. And look, when you go deep into conversation, people tell you they've been deeply impressed with Kemi. She's come out with very clear arguments, a real statement about what it is to be a modern Conservative. But the worry is, if they back Kemi and Liz, Mordaunt will slip through. And I haven't really sensed that big support. And also, it does feel like, has Rishi's bunch given us Mordaunt in order so he only has to face her in the final will make it much more possible for him to win. I believe we need someone from the right. Kemi or Liz Truss would be good for me, but if I had to pick, I was deeply impressed with Kemi's launch.
Emily Carver, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because lots of the analysis from the mainstream media is very basic on these things. So, you know, ITV News, Sly News, BBC, they're saying, oh, this is great for Rishi, this is great for Mordaunt. And don't get me wrong, Mordaunt's had, wow, an incredible 48 hours. However, when you actually look at how these leadership contests go, it's about the blocks because people keep getting knocked out. So there'll be another one knocked out on Monday, another one knocked out on Tuesday. And actually, Truss still has a chance to win, doesn't she?
Yeah, definitely. If she gets the support of the pro-Brexit, the right wing of the party, those MPs, and they decide to back her instead of Kemi Badenoch, then she could be in for the win, because I do think that most Conservative members, at least the majority, would choose her over Rishi. Yeah. However, I was watching Liz Truss, and I think she's going to have to step it up a notch on the personality front, because I think she came across as slightly awkward, maybe a bit stilted, maybe a little nervous, and this is one of her problems, her likeability factor, because the Conservative Party can't just be looking so insular. They have to think about the next general election. It has to be someone that's going to make Keir Starmer look more wooden than he already does. Yeah, it's got to be someone with charisma, and Kemi Badenoch could be that dark horse.
Yeah. So, Amy, these debates over the weekend, Friday night, Sunday night, they are critical, aren't they? Because this is the first time all of the candidates are going to be side by side, and Truss sort of has to outperform Badenoch.
Yeah, I think that's going to be extremely hard, particularly picking up on Emily's point, because I think whenever you watch a clip of Liz Truss speaking, it's almost like she's been pulled up at a funeral to do a eulogy. She keeps checking her notes. It's not really a great look. The only time I've ever seen some true passion is when the disgraceful cheese incident. If she could harness her passion for disgraceful cheese imports in the debates, then I think perhaps she could be with a chance. However, recent polling suggests that with Conservative MPs that people aren't as keen to have anyone involved in the last cabinet. So people want to distance themselves from the absolute horror show that was Boris Johnson's cabinet. And that's where I think Liz Truss is going to struggle, because she is so closely attached to Boris Johnson. And I know you think that could be a plus point for her.
I think it's a plus thing amongst Conservative Party members.
She is very committed to free market Conservative principles that has been missing from Boris Johnson's
tenure. And Emily,
tenure.
she's the most experienced cabinet
She's
minister.
the most experienced. She does have principles, but I do agree that she needs to work on her speech making.
Let's look at these things in
But we should go for substance over style, shouldn't we?
But that's our good thing, because you've got to remember the MPs know Liz Truss and know there's more substance than maybe style. But that's the same for Kemi. I would be very shocked if she could outperform Kemi, because Kemi is full of passion and she really knows her stuff and believes in it. So when you're looking to who to pick, I think people need to go a bit deeper.
So this is a huge
I don't
moment
think anyone's going to beat the performance of Penny Mordaunt this week, though. She's been flawless. She has been quick-witted. She's been articulate. She's had conviction.
But she doesn't have the detail. Here's the thing, right? Let me try to avoid to be unkind. Kemi and Liz are incredibly clever women. That isn't something that people have accused Penny Mordaunt of in the past. These two women are head and shoulders above her in intellectual terms. And ultimately, when you're picking someone to run the party, you need someone who's intellectually stable. You need someone who has morals. And also, you need someone who gets the fine detail. You heard what Lord Frost said. And that is what we cannot have.
And it's a worry because I respect Lord Frost a lot. Yeah. Emily, final word on this breaking development tonight, a huge boost for the Truss campaign with Suella Braverman officially set to endorse her.
Yeah, I think it's looking good for Truss. If I was a betting man, I'd probably put my money on it being Rishi versus Truss when it comes down to the final two. But on the point of Penny, I think Lord Frost's intervention is very, very important because a lot of people were looking, myself included, were looking at Penny and thinking, she looks fab, she looks like she could do the role, she's got fantastic hair, she speaks well, she's humorous, she can be, you know, quite cutting and ruthless in some of her speeches and so on. But when you get into the detail, the nitty-gritty of her beliefs, they are not on the libertarian right of the party, that's for sure.
They are something that could go across the board mainstream and they could really actually take those voting
But right now it's about Tory party members. Tory party members decide.
I disagree. They're not. No. They're not mainstream views, and the party was elected with an 80-seat majority. If you have a prime minister who is a woman who cannot identify a woman, I think Tory party members are going to have a problem with that.
It pains me to say this, but Penny Mordaunt could beat Keir Starmer, and I can't believe I'm saying that.
Okay.
I think all of them could.
Amy
No,
Nicole?
they couldn't.
Sean Bailey, Emily Kavanagh. By the way,
Amy for Penny.
Well, I was going to say you may well end up in a Penny Mordaunt campaign ad because do you know we had Benjamin Butterworth on the sofa earlier in the week, and he said that that Penny Mordaunt is the candidate who the Labour Party fears most.
100%.
And within 24 hours, he was in a campaign ad for Penny Mordaunt saying exactly that. So, Amy, you may end up in a PM for PM advert.
Benjamin will be a Tory in about 5 years.
Inevitable. Emily Kavanagh, Sean Bailey, Amy Nicole, my superstar panel, they're here all night. But coming up, on that note, Penny Mordaunt, the favourite candidate of Tory party members right now, is she just too woke to be PM? Well, political firebrand Anne Whittaker has been looking into this closely. She's going to reveal her verdict. It's fascinating at 9:40. But up next, as Spartan Brexiteer Suella Braverman throws her support behind Liz Truss, should Kemi Badenoch follow suit and create a dream ticket to challenge Rishi and Penny? My blockbuster lineup of political masterminds, David Mallow, David Bannerman, Laura Dodsworth, Tim Stanley and Joe Porter battle it out over Tory tactics, and they're going to reveal who they're backing to be PM next. Want to know what you think, though? Email me, Dan at gbnews.uk, tweet at gbnews. We've got a poll running there too. The results after the break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Anne Whittaker and comedian and author Constantine Kisin on the way this hour. But it's time now for The Clash. As I outlined in my digest tonight, the Tory right risk losing out in the battle for number 10 unless they unite behind one candidate, probably Liz Truss. If Liz Truss and Kemi Badenoch combine their respective 64 and 49 backers, that could go a long way in helping the Foreign Secretary join Rishi Sunak or Penny Mordaunt in the final two. But what do you think? Should Truss and Badenoch unite on a dream ticket to challenge Fishy Rishi and Penny Mordaunt? My email, dan@gbnews.uk. Tweet your thoughts to @GBNews. We've got a poll running there too, and I'll bring you the results very shortly. But first, our political masterminds are back to make their case for their chosen candidate for PM. Look at them. The author and journalist Laura Dodsworth, she's backing Kemi Badenoch. Former Tory Minister David Mallor, who thinks he wants Rishi. Chairman of the Freedom Association and ex-Conservative MEP David Campbell Bannerman, who's supporting Liz Truss. Daily Telegraph columnist Tim Stanley, who wants Tom Tugendhat, in number 10. And Conservative councillor Joe Porter, who's behind the surging Penny Mordaunt. So, David Campbell Bannerman, let me get to you first. You're going for Liz Truss. Do you think she can do it? Because right now in the MP's vote, she's obviously behind both Sunak and Mordaunt.
I do think she can do it. Obviously, the right is splintered at the moment, but it's coming together. Tonight, we've had Suella Braverman rowing in behind Liz Truss, and I hope we can get Kemi Badenoch as well. And then I think, Liz Truss will become the favourite. I mean, Rishi has slipped back today. But Liz Truss is showing a lot of momentum. So, yes, I do think she can do it.
Laura Dodsworth, look, I love Kemi Badenoch, right? I have loved the woman for years. Her origin story is incredible. It's actually inspirational. Her policy positions are completely aligned with mine. She's anti-woke. I think she's a future Prime Minister. I really do. My concern, Laura, is that at the moment, she is splitting that vote on the right. And it risks Mordaunt and Sunak being the final two, don't you think?
That's possible. But I like the fact that she has gone into this leadership race based on her own conviction and principles, and she doesn't appear to be playing a game that's about vote rigging. Now, I'm going to just make a kind of a light point in favour of her, but I spent half my life on Twitter, but I was pleased to hear her say that she would discard the priorities of Twitter. I think that says a lot about who she is. It's a small point, but it means something a little bit more about ignoring the elite chattering classes, hopefully discarding polls as politicians have relied so heavily upon. Like you say, she's anti-woke. I think that will chime with Conservative voters, but also most of the country. Now, it feels like this is setting a very low bar, but she knows what a woman is. And furthermore, she's against self-ID, and she's had the confidence to say so. For me, a black mark for Penny Mordaunt is whatever rowing back she does now. She has said at the dispatch box that trans women are women and trans men are men, which is semantically, philosophically not true. I think another point that's very much in favour of Kemi Badenoch at the moment is she's outlined her fears for hyperinflation. And anyone who was alive to the potential consequences of lockdown 2 years ago has also been worried about hyperinflation. I think she has a very clear political philosophy, which is small state, low tax and limited government. Those are true Conservative values, which I think would steer us through a horrible economic mess we're in, but set up quite a clear vision. And essentially, this is what I think it comes down to with Kemi. She has a vision, and she's projecting into the future. I think with some of the other candidates, you can't really put a piece of paper between them. But I think she'd present a real challenge for other political parties. It'd be quite hard to come at her. And she's looking into the future. She's talking about what our values should be as a country.
Yep. No, I hear that. Look, I'm going to come to the Conservative councillor Joe Porter next, because there was a little dig there from Laura at your chosen candidate, Penny Mordaunt. And you have to admit, Joe, I mean, the full forces of the right of the Tory party have been unleashed on Mordaunt over the past 24 hours since that bombshell YouGov poll showing that she's clearly the favourite amongst Conservative members. What did you make of that interview by Lord Frost this morning? I mean, he slammed her, Joe. He said she wasn't really committed to Brexit. In fact, she was so bad at her job, he had to ask Boris to get rid.
So, for me, Penny Mordaunt offers this country the fresh leadership that we so badly need at the moment. We need to restore trust in politics, and we need to reunite our country. For me, Penny encompasses the high moral leadership that this country needs in these dangerous times. She's got an armed forces background, and she's served in high office. She's served across government in a number of key positions. She's somebody who will deliver for our communities as well. She's somebody who's a very good constituency MP. She does a brilliant job in Portsmouth North. She's demonstrated that she's able to deliver for communities in terms of that. As you quite rightly say, Dan, Penny is polled top of the YouGov poll amongst Conservative grassroots members. She's also the most popular candidate in Redwall seats, and personally what I'm interested in is the Conservative Party keeping those Redwall seats at the next election, because we got that 80-seat majority, we've got to keep it, and Penny is the candidate to appeal to those Redwall voters. She's the one who can carry on that levelling up agenda and try and help some of those left behind communities.
OK, David Mallet, you were, of course, a former Conservative minister, a big beast of the party, and I believe you're not that enthusiastic about any of the candidates, but you're leaning towards Rishi Sunak. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, I think the problem is listening to this interesting debate. It's like we're electing someone to run a debating society. What we're electing is somebody to be Prime Minister. Now, being Prime Minister is a huge job, and we shouldn't be looking to make ideological distinctions on the head of a pin. We should be looking at somebody who can command a government and can run a government that can deliver effective rule over a whole range of complex issues on behalf of the British people. And that's, of course, where Boris got it wrong. Boris could talk a far better game than he could play, and his government turned out to be a shambles. I have my doubts about Rishi Sunak because I think he's tarnished himself by appearing to be able to run the nation's finance, but having the family finances run by his father-in-law. But Rishi Sunak is a grown-up. I mean, Rishi Sunak has had to go through pretty tough times as Chancellor. And what worries me about some of the others is they really don't. I mean, Penny Mordaunt, for instance, spent 85 days, I'm sure 85 thrilling days, as Secretary of State for Defence. That's all she did. And, I mean, if I was Penny Mordaunt and I had received that accolade from Lord Frost this morning, I just want to go and jump off a high building. Because you really cannot elect a Prime Minister where a man like Frost, now I take the view that Frost is not a very dispassionate fellow. I don't think he's in the pocket of any of the other candidates. He's not that kind of guy. But he was plainly exasperated by Penny Mordaunt. And his exasperation with Penny Mordaunt was on substantive issues about her grip on policy, her ability to master the detail, all the things that a good Prime Minister needs. And I just think it was a devastating indictment of her.
Yeah, I agree. Look, sorry to come to you last, Tim Stanley, but it's great to have you. I've wanted to have you on the show for a long time. You're hanging on in there with your man, Tom Tugendhat. But is the reality not that he's going to go on Monday? He's lost all momentum, Tim.
He is the underdog, but there are going to be debates. And I've always felt with Tom that the more people get to meet him and hear from him, the more they'll like him. My support for him is not ideological. I agree with what David Miller actually just said. I think when you elect someone to be the Prime Minister, I don't think it should be based purely on a sort of tick box and do you agree with me on this position or that position. Really, it should be judged upon character and experience and whether or not you feel you can. And in the case of Tom, I've known him personally for a long time. I trust him. He's someone who I would trust with my life, with my dog's life, and also with my country. And even though I don't agree with him on everything, I think he does have that character and experience to do the job. And I'm hoping that he'll shine in these debates. And given that it's going to get a bit clogged up in the next few days, I think some MPs might start to think, have I made the right choice with Penny? Have I made the right choice with Rishi? And maybe he'll attract a few more votes. We'll see how far he goes.
Because, Tim, I think you're right to say these debates on Friday and Sunday could have a seismic effect on the race. I mean, if someone bombs, it could be game over, right?
That's absolutely right. And that happened with some of the launches. One or two of the launches were a damp squib. And when MPs see that, it can confirm their suspicions, their reservations about a candidate. I mean, Sajid Javid had a very bad early launch. It was small and sweaty, and it didn't have a great deal of substance.
I felt so sorry for him. I know he needed some aircon on. Oh, goodness.
Knocking away the sweat with a towel. It was terrible to watch. But I think what people I expect to see shine in that debate are Tom, obviously, but I think it's Kemi's chance to shine as well.
Yeah, no, it really is.
I think the Brexiteers are going to have to rally eventually and choose one candidate. But
David Mallow?
No, I was just going to say, I think maybe the best candidate to be Prime Minister then is Prince Andrew, because he never sweats.
But he also gives a very bad interview. David Campbell Bannerman, Emily Carver, who's on our Superstar panel tonight, a columnist for Conservative Home, she likes Liz Truss, but she thought Liz Truss didn't perform strongly at her launch today. She felt she was flat with her delivery. Does Liz need to have a bit of va-va-va-boom, get up and go in these debates?
Well, I was there actually this morning at the launch. No, I think she did really well. And
maybe better in the room, do you think? Or?
Well, yeah, I know. I think she did very well. Some very good points. You know, I like what she was saying this morning. But I agree with David. I mean, essentially, the problem is we haven't got 4 candidates going through to the membership. We've only got 2. And that means experience really counts. And it really does come down. I mean, Liz has got that experience, the Foreign Secretary, obviously, helping with Ukraine, but also Chief Secretary to the Treasury.
Well, she's the most experienced member of the Cabinet now.
Sorry, say again.
She's the most experienced member of the Cabinet now.
Oh, well, she is. And she's got, you know, she's done brilliantly, by the way. You know, I debated her in the referendum in the east of England, in the official debate. She was a Remainer, but not a very passionate one. She was very reluctant, but she's really grabbed it, and she's done a fantastic job on trade deals. I worked for 10 years on the European Parliament on trade deals, and some of those are still waiting while Liz has got the British ones done.
Laura and Tim, let me come to both of you about that question of experience, because the problem is your candidates haven't been in Cabinet. Laura, is that a bad thing? Does that exclude Kemi, or could she use it to her advantage?
Well, a couple of things I'd say in rebuttal. First of all, there's good experience and bad experience. So Rishi Sunak, for instance, is obviously very experienced. He's Chancellor of the Exchequer. However, he's also presided over the highest tax burden and the highest spending in 70 years. And I think those are 2 very black marks against him.
Yep, good point.
Kemi Badenoch's only been an MP for 5 years. So there is a sense that she would be a little bit of a gamble. But I think
and she has been a minister, I guess, at least.
Boris Johnson was a gamble. So, but also with Kemi, she's got the backing of Michael Gove, which is quite impressive. And also somebody like Nikki DaCosta, who's a former Director of Legislative Affairs, who's said very positive things about her.
Some people say, Laura, the backing of Michael Gove, that's a bad thing. Tim Stanley, Tom Tugendhat, he hasn't even been a minister. But I was listening to him earlier today, and he actually thinks that's a selling point.
He does, yeah. I think it's a very conservative thing to say it should be someone from the top 3 jobs, Chancellor, Home Secretary or Foreign. I think it's very conservative to pay faith in experience. That's a reasonable thing. But these are highly unusual times. That's the Tom argument. And given that many of the people sitting in the Cabinet are to some extent compromised by having been sitting in the Cabinet because they were around the table with Boris and because he has added a certain degree of toxicity to British politics, there's a case for saying taking someone outside of Cabinet who can immediately provide that, I hate the phrase, but provide that fresh start. I think there's an argument for that.
Okay.
I just want to add, I think we've got to
final word.
We should avoid political labelling in all of this. Liz Truss campaigned for Remain, right? And yet somehow she's now the Brexit candidate. Penny Mordaunt is beloved by Tory associations. I've just been reading her book. She doesn't sound terribly Tory. Rishi Sunak is supposedly some sort of centrist dinosaur, but come on, he was very pro-Leave and pro-free ports, and there have been other tax cuts that he has supported in the past. So I find it strange how Tories are allowing themselves to become tied up with these political labels, which will only do themselves damage reputationally, but don't actually reflect the record of the people who are running.
Great points. Thank you to all of you, my political masterminds. That's the Daily Telegraph columnist Tim Stanley, just there. Do come back soon, Tim. The author and journalist Laura Dodsworth, former Tory Minister David Mallow, a big beast of the party, of course, chairman of the Freedom Association and former Conservative MEP David Campbell, and backing the woman with all the momentum, Councillor Jo Porter, Penny Mordaunt, surrogate tonight. So what do you think? Should Liz Truss and Kemi Badenoch unite for a dream ticket to challenge Sunak and Mordaunt? Well, Alba on Twitter says, yes, Liz should offer to make Kemi Deputy Prime Minister. That would still be an absolutely huge accomplishment for Kemi, and she will secure her chances of being PM next time round. Right now, the right must unite if it wants to maintain power. I think that's a brilliant idea, Alba. I'm fully on board with that. From Dave on Twitter. How is Truss, a literal Liberal Democrat, Remainer who lacks even basic awareness of her brief when discussing issues with foreign ministers, in any way a dream ticket? She's continuity Boris with a lower IQ and shorter attention span. Oh, that's mean. And from Robin on email, Kemi is better than that. She is there to win, not come second, which is why she should not support another candidate. She is the only candidate who will leave Labour with nothing to say. All brilliant comments tonight. Your verdict now in. 63% of you agree that Truss and Kavanagh should unite to take on Sunak and Mordaunt. 37% of you say, no. Kavanagh, she could be PM. She needs to go her own way. This is going to be a fascinating 3 days. And, of course, Monday night show is going to be explosive. Coming up, how do we cure the West of its terminal case of self-loathing? Trigonometry podcast host Constantine Kisin has written a new book about growing up under Soviet rule that he hopes will restore pride in British values. He's tonight's Outsider at 9:50. But first is Tory party member favourite Penny Mordaunt just too woke for number 10. Political firebrand and former Tory minister Anne Widdecombe takes a look at the evidence next.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Time now for the latest on the battle to be PM with Anne Widdecombe. In today's vote, after she finished runner-up to Rishi Sunak. However, for many inside the party, there remain serious questions around Mordaunt's suitability, really, for the job, especially regarding her previous stances on issues of identity politics. For example, Mordaunt said to have been a staunch defender of trans extremists during her time as Women's and Equalities Minister, a claim that she made great efforts to diffuse during her launch event.
I think it was Margaret Thatcher that said that every Prime Minister needs a willy. A woman like me doesn't have one. I'm a woman, I am biologically a woman, and I can tell you, Chris, that if you have been in the Royal Navy and you have competed physically against men, you understand the biological difference between men and women.
Very good lines there, I have to say. But unfortunately for Penny, some people say her views or former views are hiding in plain sight. Free Speech Union founder Toby Young has critically analysed her 2020 book, Greater Britain after the storm, and he's unearthed some interesting discoveries. Among them, her praise for communist China, relentless promotion of the LGBTQI+ agenda, and beliefs that more hate speech should be censored. Here's a couple of the greatest hits from Toby. The sitcom It Ain't Half Hot Mum featured casual racism, homophobia, white privilege, colonialism and transphobia. The problem is most of our leaders are drawn from a narrow background. Their education and training was from the last century when the world was very different. It was long-term male, patient, predictable, factual, planned, heterosexual, white, Christian, Western. So there's some of the receipts, Anne Widdecombe. What's your view? Is Penny Mordaunt too woke to be Prime Minister, Anne?
Well, I think she's far too woke, and when somebody talks about censoring hate speech, what they actually mean is censoring free speech. And whoever gets this job has got to be somebody who believes in free speech and who will restore liberties, which we've had taken from us now. Penny Mordaunt clearly is on the side of the oppressors when it comes to free speech. And those quotes that Toby Young has produced demonstrate that very, very well. So thank you, Toby Young. And maybe at the next hustings, she should be confronted with those actual quotes and ask if she still stands by wanting to censor hate speech. If so, how does she define hate speech? And I'm amazed for a Conservative that this is her philosophical stand.
She's so popular, Anne, with the members at the moment. Do you think that, and you're very in touch with the Tory grassroots, do you think that's because they don't know that she holds these views, or they know that she holds these views and they're OK with it?
No, I don't think they're OK with it. I don't think they realise the extent of the views. I mean, I think they may think she said something en passant. But when you actually get quotes like that, that is more than an en passant comment. That is a statement of a particular standpoint that Penny Mordaunt takes. Now, there is nothing in the world that says she shouldn't take that standpoint, but she should be completely honest about it and own up to it. And then let the membership judge, instead of which what she's trying to do now is to row back and say, oh, no, I've never said that. Yes, Penny, you did. And free speech to me is crucial. And the idea of having a prime minister who wants to extend censorship really worries me.
What about her views on biological women, Anne? Because there's been a lot of criticism for the fact that she said in Parliament trans men are men and trans women are women. Obviously, that's before that question was at the heart of this massive culture war debate.
Indeed. And I mean, she made her position very clear there as well. Now, most of us would say that a woman is a woman and a man is a man, and you can't just self-identify as one or the other according as the whim takes you. And it's all very well now she's trying to say, oh, well, I wasn't talking about demedicalizing things. I was talking about actual people who've transitioned. But that doesn't wash because, she made very, very general, unqualified statements. And if somebody like that is leading the Conservative Party, then heaven help the Conservative Party.
And I just want to get your reaction to some breaking news in this Conservative Party race tonight. Obviously, earlier this evening, we learned that Suella Braverman, who was knocked out, is going to be backing Liz Truss. Further developments on that front. The Daily Telegraph has revealed tonight that the former ERG chairman, Steve Baker, really one of the Brexit hard men, is also going to back Liz Truss. He was, of course, really running the campaign for Braverman. He's told the Daily Telegraph tonight, Suella has my complete loyalty. What she has decided, I will support. So do you think this is the Brexit wing of the Tories saying, we're going for Truss?
I could well be. I mean, my fear about Truss is always that I don't think she's quite ready. I mean, I'm actually, if you ask me which candidate I would prefer, then on basis of sheer competence, she's delivered the trade deals, and on the basis that, she did accept the result of the referendum and has gone wholeheartedly out to make Brexit work, then I'd prefer her to most of the other candidates. But I'm just slightly uncertain that she is entirely ready. She doesn't have much of a personality. Now, you might say that's a good thing, considering what we've just been through, but I don't think it's going to cut it on the election trail. And so I do have that worry about her. But as I say, if you give me all those candidates at the moment, I would say, yes, she's the nearest thing to what I want.
Great stuff, Anne. Obviously, you'll be with us next week as the twists and turns of this race develop. Anne Widdecombe, thank you so much. But coming up, as Scheming Sturgeon claims there's a, quote, democratic deficit north of the border, is the First Minister wrong to exploit the Tory leadership contest for her deluded independence push? And are the candidates really overlooking this critical issue of the union? My superstar panel debate that in the Media Buzz after 10, and we'll have the first front pages of the newspapers then too. But first, are woke Westerners in danger of taking our freedoms for granted? Trigonometry host Constantine Kisin has written a new book about growing up under Soviet rule that he hopes will cure our terminal case of self-loathing. Constantine is the outsider next.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go? Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Top political journalist Trevor Kavanagh coming up after 10. But first, comedian and trigonometry podcast host Constantine Kisin is tonight's outsider. Now, we all know self-loathing lefties love nothing more than to deride Britain. But in his brilliant new book, there it is, An Immigrant's Love Letter to the West, Constantine defends our open, tolerant and great country as one of the best places to live in the world. He uses his first-hand horrors that he and his family suffered at the hands of communism in the Soviet Union to offer a unique and important perspective to those who denigrate Western society, that the alternative to our liberal democracy is far worse, and we shouldn't take values like free speech for granted. And Constantine joins me now in the studio. So, Constantine, here is the book. It is out today. This is a love letter to the West, really, isn't it?
It is, and I think it's really important that in this moment when we've got, one of the points that I make in the book is we've had it very easy for a long time, Dan, which is perhaps why some people think we've got no problems, we've got no enemies, we don't need to be able to defend ourselves, we don't need to be united, we don't need British values or American values, we can just sort of disintegrate as a society over time and question everything and beat ourselves up endlessly for things that people did 300 years ago who looked remotely like us. I'm afraid that's not true. We've got big problems. We've got serious, powerful opponents around the world. And if we don't come together and don't realize that all of this cultural nonsense that we spend far too much time talking about, you and I both, frankly, then we're going to be in serious problems.
The problem is, right, if you don't fight back against the small examples, it gets out of control, doesn't it? You know, we're erasing our history, we're erasing biological sex. I mean, you see it all over the world, in the Western world, don't you?
I agree with you.
I imagine folk in Russia, and I imagine Putin in Russia is just laughing.
And helping, encouraging this process. Of course they have been, and the Chinese too. We know this from their online activity. This is very helpful to them. This is my point, Dan. And you're right. Of course you're right. We have to be able to define what a woman is. We have to get past all this racial divisiveness. Of course we do. And what I tried to do in the book is speak to people who may be on the progressive left side of things in a way that I hope gives them a lived experience, they love that term, perspective of an immigrant, and what I appreciate, why people like me, if you think about, if you are on the left, let's say, you want immigrants to be able to come here, you think it's really important. Well, why do people like me and you, Dan, we're both immigrants to this country, why do we want to come here? Right? It's because this country is free. It's because it's prosperous. It's because here you can say what you think until recently, etc., etc., etc. And if we don't appreciate that, we will throw it away.
So how bad was it growing up in the Soviet Union?
Well, I grew up in the late Soviet Union, by which time, you know, the sort of horrors of the Stalinist purges and the gulags were over. But of course, my own family, my grandmother, born in a gulag, her father was there, essentially a slave working on the mines there. And it was terrible for them. I obviously grew up hearing all their stories. But Dan, this is why I wrote the book, An Immigrant's Love Letter to the West, because think about where we are now. In late Soviet times, I'm talking about the 1980s now, my grandfather made some comments about the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. And within a few days, he was made unemployable. He was ostracized by friends. Does that sound that different to what happens to people who say the wrong thing in Western society today? That's why I wrote it, because I'm deeply concerned that we are adopting things from a foreign culture that are very, very troubling. And of course, I talk also in the book about the origins of political correctness. Do you know where it comes from?
No.
The Soviet Union. In the Soviet Union, people like my ancestors were told, well, comrade, this may be factually correct, but it is politically incorrect. And what it meant was you were saying something that was counter to the party line. It didn't matter if it was true or not. It just meant that you were not saying something that was acceptable in society at the time. And again, we've seen that in our society as well. We've got to reject this nonsense, Dan.
How ironic is it, Constantine, that now you're established as one of our major free speech champions? You know, trigonometry has a huge following. And, of course, this has all come at a time when your country of birth is now engaged in this war with the West.
It's atrocious, and you know my feelings on the subject, Dan. I think what's happening is terrible, but that's why I'm making the points that I'm making. I'm trying to remind people, we don't have time to faff about with all this nonsense. We've got serious challenges coming up. The economic future is going to be very bleak for a lot of people. As you know, with the global food crisis, there's going to be famine around the world because of the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. We've got big problems, and the only way that we can fix them is once we put this cultural nonsense aside. We say we all know what a woman is. We understand that this is one of the most open, welcoming, tolerant countries, not just in the world today, Dan, in the entire history of the human species. And as soon as we can get to that, our Prime Minister no longer has to answer all these silly questions and can actually govern the country in the interest of the people.
Have you seen any candidate in the Tory election contest going on right now who you think is best placed to take those values and put them into running the country?
Well, I think the person who is best placed to dismiss all of this stuff as it needs doing is Kavanagh. I'm concerned that she voted for vaccine passports. I've heard from people I trust that she did so because of collective responsibility rather than personal conviction. I accept that we're now sort of beyond the age in which ministers resign when things happen that they don't agree with. So she's the one that would be my preference. I'm certainly concerned that the front runners particularly are not going to be doing this. And that worries me deeply.
Yeah, no, I know. It's a fascinating one, isn't it? Because the thing about this race is obviously you've got to be practical in terms of thinking about who actually has a chance of getting to the final two and then winning. But I think when it comes to pure politics, probably Kavanagh is the one that certainly matches the values of free speech. Constantine Kisin, An Immigrant's Love Letter to the West, out today. So great to have you back, Constantine. It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, Liz Truss has kicked off her campaign to be PM with an ensured performance that I hope the right of the Tory party were listening to.
I'm loyal to Boris Johnson. I supported our Prime Minister's aspirations, and I want to deliver the promise of the 2019 manifesto.
With Truss finishing in the latest round of voting behind Rishi Sunak and favourite Penny Mordaunt, who Boris ally Lord Frost today revealed his grave concerns about.
Do you think that she is the right person to fight the culture wars?
I think honesty, I think clarity, I think taking a position and sticking to it and defending it and not accommodating yourself to everyone else is what we're going to need.
Is the clock ticking for MPs to prevent a pseudo-Conservative being installed in number 10? Former political editor of The Sun, Trevor, Kavanagh analyses at 10:20. As Nicola Sturgeon today claims the Democratic deficit, her words, north of the border, is, quote, starker than ever ahead of the appointment of yet another Prime Minister Scotland hasn't voted for. Is she wrong to exploit the Tory leadership contest for her independence push?
A Prime Minister with no democratic endorsement whatsoever from Scotland will be replaced by another Prime Minister that Scotland hasn't voted for, indeed wouldn't vote for, even if we were given the opportunity.
My superstar panel of Conservative Home columnist Emily Carver, former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and author and journalist Amy Nicol will debate that next and ask if the leadership candidates really need to focus more on how they'll keep the union together. Is free speech online dead? Now Elon Musk no longer wants to buy Twitter. Social media sensation Zuby explains why you should care about the battle between the billionaire and big tech in Uncancelled at 10:40. The BBC have scored a massive own goal, broadcasting this outrageous comment at the Women's Euros in the same week the starting 11 on their talent-rich list is revealed to be all white.
Lioness has secured their place in the quarter-finals, but all starting 11 players and the 5 substitutes that came onto the pitch were all white.
So does the BBC have any right to criticise the England women's football team for its lack of diversity? Plus, Middle-earth is calling once again.
This could be the beginning of a new era.
Wow, I'll preview the much-anticipated, very, very expensive Lord of the Rings TV series in the Media Buzz at 10:30. We'll have a first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages coming up throughout the hour too, and the final Greatest Britain Union Jackass of the week will close out the show at 10:50. But before all of that, the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you very much indeed. The top stories on GB News tonight. Suella Braverman has told GB News there are no authentic Brexiteers left in the Tory leadership race. That's after the Attorney-General was knocked out of the second round of voting in the race to replace Boris Johnson. There are now 5 candidates left battling it out to lead the Conservative Party and ultimately the country. The former Chancellor Rishi Sunak is still the front runner. Trade Minister Penny Mordaunt is in second place. Further rounds of voting will continue next week until 2 candidates are left. Suella Braverman says she still hasn't decided who she's going to back, but there are rumours tonight she might come out in support of Liz Truss.
He's the only authentic Brexiteer in the contest. I'm going to have to look for someone who comes close to my credentials. Because we need to deliver on the Brexit promises, remove regulations, make sure people feel that they are better off and that it was worth it, and that Northern Ireland still remains part of the UK.
Meanwhile, the Labour leader says the Tories are fighting like cats in a bag. Sir Keir Starmer is calling for a general election.
We've set out our mission for an incoming Labour government, rebooting our economy, revitalising our public services and uniting our country. And that's why I say we should have a general election, time for real change. We've had 12 years of stagnation. A change of leader isn't going to change that. We need a change of government.
Breaking news, another 2 rail strikes are taking place next month. RMT members at Network Rail and 14 train operators now saying they'll walk out on August the 18th and the 20th. That's in a dispute over jobs, pay and conditions. It follows the announcement earlier today by RMT members that they'll also strike on the 27th and 30th of July as well. And the news tonight that Ivana Trump has died at the age of 73. She was born in the Czech Republic and married former President Donald Trump in 1977. They divorced 15 years later. They had 3 children together, Donald Jr., Ivanka and Eric Trump. Donald Trump has confirmed his ex-wife passed away in her apartment in New York on his website, Truth Social. International news and protesters in Sri Lanka have celebrated in the streets today after the resignation of the President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. He fled to Singapore this week after demonstrators converged on the presidential palace. The unrest in Sri Lanka began as the country started running out of food, fuel and medicine. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+, you're with GB News. Now back to Dan Wootton tonight.
Tomorrow's News Tonight now in our Media Buzz. First, look at the front pages, and the Eye reports how Tory rivals quote, turn on Mordaunt. It describes how Liz Truss is in a race against time to unite the Tory right and win their support. Exactly what I've been saying. Pennies in heaven, according to the Metro. They report how Mordaunt finished ahead of closest rival Liz Truss in today's ballot. And tomorrow's Daily Telegraph headline leads with what we were talking about earlier in the show. David Frost urges Badenoch to stand down for Truss as more peers warn against a split in the Tory right, and Suella Braverman backs the Foreign Secretary. My superstar panel are back with me now. Conservative Home columnist Emily Carver, Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the broadcaster and author Amy Nicole. Now, maybe you'll change at Westminster, but Nicola Sturgeon still has a stranglehold on the Scottish political landscape and is continuing to sound like a broken record as she presses on with her independence ploy. Speaking in Edinburgh, the Scottish First Minister unveiled the second instalment of her juvenile Indie Ref 2 project with a paper titled Renewing Democracy Through Independence. Look.
Today's paper, though, focuses on democracy and democratic renewal. It exposes the significant and increasing democratic deficit that Scotland suffers as part of the Union. A Prime Minister with no democratic endorsement whatsoever from Scotland will be replaced by another Prime Minister that Scotland hasn't voted for, indeed wouldn't vote for, even if we were given the opportunity.
Moaning about a democratic deficit is a bit rich, given the SNP's snaring disregard for the result of a, remember, once-in-a-generation referendum in 2014. This is what we've come to expect, though, from scheming Sturgeon, and the candidates should have known she'd exploit any kind of Westminster upheaval to claim Scotland is better off alone. My big concern, actually, is that the Tory leadership contenders are ignoring the elephant in the room while they're offering grand ideas, as they should, for the cost of living crisis and cutting tax. Very little has been said about protecting the union. The frontrunner Rishi Sunak failed to mention the issue once during his campaign launch on Tuesday, which didn't go unnoticed among Scottish Conservatives. So with the divisive rhetoric from Sturgeon intensifying, should the preservation of the union be higher up the priority list for these Tory candidates, Sean Bailey?
I think why most of them haven't gone on about it is because it's a given. We are called a Conservative and Unionist party. I think we'll always defend the union as best we can. And everybody knows Sturgeon's plan. Look, let's be clear, she's a brilliant politician. Bringing it up now to get it highlighted is her prerogative. Of course, she should do that. But she talks about democracy. She is the one ignoring democracy. She said it was a once-in-a-generation vote. It was only 10 years ago or whatever it was. That's less than a generation. She needs
less than that.
Exactly. She needs to move on and let it go. And she talked about Scottish people not voting for the PM. Scotland is part of this country. You vote for a party. The Conservative Party won. Everybody understands if you change leader, that person is representing the party. And you vote for the manifesto, which meant preserving the union. So actually she's wrong. She knows she's wrong and she should stop pretending.
However, Nicola Sturgeon, she is actually gaslighting the Scottish people now because she knows that there is zero chance of this referendum taking place. It's an illegal referendum. She is gaslighting Scots. She is wasting tens of millions of pounds. She is a disgrace.
I just can't get my head around the fact that you're surprised that a nationalist leader of a nationalist party is sticking to their mandate of providing a referendum for Scottish independence. It'd be like having the Sean Bailey party without Sean Bailey. Like, this just makes sense.
No, but I'm sorry, she's not
Hang on a
only
minute.
the leader of
Can
the SNP,
I
she's
finish my
Scotland.
point, which is that Scotland hasn't voted Tory since 1955 in their election, which has consistently voted the SNP in power. The SNP consistently is at odds with the policies put in by Westminster. So Westminster.
Yes,
so
okay,
it's not...
Amy, that's all well and good, but if you look at the polling, there is no demand. Well, there's not majority demand in Scotland for another referendum, and there certainly wouldn't be a majority if it was put to a vote right now. And she brings out these papers, these reports, her new plans for an independent referendum, and it's all based on absolute fantasy economics. It would be disastrous for Scotland. And let's not forget, there are huge numbers of Scottish people in Scotland today who want to remain part of the United Kingdom. And she talks about democracy. But she wasn't happy to allow that vote in 2014, the last Scottish referendum, to take hold. As Sean said, that was a once in a generation. However, I do agree with her that there is some kind of democratic deficit. I think the democratic deficit is the fact that 14 million people voted for Boris Johnson and now he's been ousted off the back of what MPs...
You don't have a problem with that, Amy.
You
don't have a problem with that when it comes to the ousting of Boris, do you?
Well, no, because you vote for the Conservative Party, not Boris Johnson himself.
Yeah, we talk about
We've been through this.
Yes, but the point is, when it comes to Scottish independence, right, we are one country. The United Kingdom is one country. And Scotland voted in 2014 to stay in the United Kingdom.
However,
as Emily says, everything Sturgeon says is based on fantasy because they're not going to be able to re-enter the EU, probably at all, unless they adopt the euro. Then Spain would veto the whole thing anyway. So her whole case is based on fantasy, and she's wasting tens of millions of pounds to promote a fantasy.
You've hit upon something really important to this, that, 2014,
I usually do.
a lot has changed because we had the small issue of Brexit. Now, Scotland voted overwhelmingly to remain within the EU, and I think that's why this is even more important.
Amy, why would you want to support a nationalist? You are not a nationalist.
Because...
You're a liberal, presumably, a left-wing. Why on earth would you want to support such a bigoted woman who has hatred for England, supersedes absolutely everything? At the moment, Scotland has NHS waiting lists, the longest that they've ever had. Cost of living crisis even worse than in this country,
Drug
in
deaths.
England. It's awful what's going up in Scotland. And the people, it's the Scottish Labour Party, it's the Scottish Conservative Party, it's normal people in Scotland who are sick and tired of Nicola Sturgeon bringing up the same old thing to try and deflect from her failures.
The reason that she would continue to push this is because she sees it as a way of Scotland being able to escape that, all those things that you've just listed.
Because she's in charge of the health system. She's in charge of the health system now, and it's been a complete disaster.
Within the constraints of what she's given from
Well, where's all the
Westminster.
money going to come from? You clearly haven't looked at the finances of this because if Scotland leaves the
Ultimately, it comes down to this. The people of Scotland had an opportunity to vote for independence and they voted to stay part of the Union. What they should be doing now is forcing Nicola Sturgeon to focus on Scotland and not her own agenda.
She's the
NHS in Scotland's in it,
Party.
and that's correct. But Scotland, as a leader of Scotland, even beyond her home views of being separate from the UK, she has to look after Scotland, and that she's failing to do.
The whole purpose of the party is to promote independence.
No, the whole purpose of the party is to look after Scotland.
And by the way, at the last election, though, Emily, she was very clear. Yeah. She said to the Scottish people, this isn't a vote about independence. This is a vote about recovery from COVID. And you can vote for us even if you don't believe in independence.
She just flip-flops all over the place. But what I would say is the Conservatives do have a problem in Scotland, and they do need to sort that out.
We've had a problem for a long time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, the lovely lynch mob are still crying over the planned sale of biased broadcaster Channel 4. And last night, foul-mouthed Doctor Who screenwriter Russell T Davies fanned the flames of lefty hysteria. taking to the stage at this year's South Bank Sky Arts Awards to accept the Best TV Drama Gong for his brilliant drama, by the way. Absolutely loved it, despite the fact it's by Russell T Davies. It's a sin. The high-profile producer issued a deranged attack, really, on the Tories, branding them murderers. Look.
It's also saying, well, I've got this stage, this was made by Channel 4, public service broadcaster, dedicated to making this sort of programme. We know what the government has said, they're going to sell that off. I know the government's wounded at the moment, but it's like a wounded dog bites everyone, and the rabies will spread. It's still in danger. They've said they're selling Channel 4, and they have said they're stopping the licence fee by 2027, and we have to realise that the things the Tories say they will do, they do. They're very good at that. We're full of doubt. They're not. They will do this. It is wrong. I know I'm kind of trying to speak into the converted, but there's money in this room. And if there's money in the room, that means there's Tory voters in here. You are here, and you're certainly watching at home. So please know, you are voting for murderers, bastards, abusers, and liars.
Selling off the lefty broadcaster has been a Tory manifesto promise for over a decade, but according to Davies, that makes them murderers. I mean, what's he afraid of? If his precious Channel 4 is so great, it will survive in a commercial market. Sean Bailey, I feel like I've got to give you a right of reply as the Conservative member on the panel. Russell T Davies says you're all murderers because you want to sell off Channel 4. What's he on?
I have no idea what cloud cuckoo land he's living in, but I will say this. If he believes so much in the abilities of Channel 4, the attractiveness of Channel 4, he should look forward to it being independent, being a commercial. They can fund all the kind of things he wants to see happen. But if he wants it to remain a public broadcaster, then it cannot support very biased, quite frankly, ludicrous and offensive words in the political arena as he tries.
But by the way, can I just say, I am so disappointed with the Conservative Party for giving the first debate in this very important contest to find their next leader, Emily Carver, to the biased Channel 4 News. It's going to be hosted by that guy, Christian, who has made clear his hatred of the Tories. And sometimes I just do despair, actually, because why would they do that?
You know what? He'll be so soft on Rishi Sunak just to wind up the right-wingers. Of
course he will.
In the Conservative Party. Why on earth would they give it to Channel 4, actually? I cannot understand that. BBC, I could understand. But I'm sure sitting at home, there are many Conservative members watching GB News than there are Channel 4
Absolutely.
News.
It's utterly
I think
insane.
it's the right thing to do. Because what you're showing Channel 4 is they may be rabidly one way or the other, but your Conservative Party, the Party of Government, everybody...
You just know what the editorial will be like.
Of course, it won't change it.
Amy, I'll just give you the final word on this. Do you want to condemn that bloke, Russell T Davies, for accusing Tories of being murderers? Because I know he's your mate, the other people you hang around with. But that was despicable, wasn't it, Amy?
Well, I feel like maybe he had a few drinks at the party and he was just a bit overzealous with his communication.
A bit overzealous?
Well, you know...
a couple of bottles of whiskey.
Yeah. I'll let him off. It's a sin was wonderful, wasn't it?
I know, but no. On a serious level, though, Amy, if a right-wing... No, this is the serious point. If a right-wing personality got up on stage at a major televised event and in their acceptance speech for an award accused the entire Labour Party of being murderers because of a policy position, that would be leading the BBC, it would be leading ITV News, you would be completely outraged over it, and you're not prepared to condemn Russell T Davies for it. I think that says a lot about the left.
I just think the opinions of Russell T Davies is a creative who makes TV shows very well. It's not really going to... It's just his opinion. We love freedom of speech.
Oh, yeah. He can say it and I can condemn it. That's how freedom of speech works. Amy Nicole, Sean Bailey, Emily Carver, thank you so much. Do stand by, because coming up, do the BBC, whose top-earning talent is rife with white faces, have any right to criticise the England women's football team for their lack of diversity? I was outraged about this today. We're going to be debating it at 10:30. But first, will Lord Frost's grave concerns about Tory leadership frontrunner Penny Mordaunt derail her skyrocketing campaign? Associate editor of The Sun, one of the most connected men in Westminster and Fleet Street, Trevor Kavanagh. He's live on this next.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
More of tomorrow's newspapers' front pages coming up, but time now for the latest on the battle to be PM with Trevor Kavanagh. Penny Mordaunt's chances of becoming Prime Minister being dealt a major blow after a savage attack by Tory grandee and top Brexit ally, really, Lord Frost this morning, the mastermind behind leaving the EU, who is widely accepted as one of the most trusted voices in the Conservative Party, took aim at Mordaunt's work as his Brexit deputy and then accused her of flip-flopping on the woke culture war. Watch.
She has said in the past trans women are women, and then she's sort of saying now, some people are calling it backtracking. She's clarifying about how, you know, biological women and who can be legally called a woman under trans self-identity, etc., etc. Do you think that she is the right person to fight the culture wars right now?
So, I mean, this is an area where you've got to, you know, stand up for what you think. She, I think, has been very clearly on one side of this argument, and now she's trying to give the impression that actually it wasn't quite like that.
Will that matter to most Tory party members who are worried about taxes and the energy bills?
I think honesty, I think clarity, I think taking a position and sticking to it and defending it and not accommodating yourself to everyone else is what we're going to need.
Now, it's been reported tonight the attack was a precursor for Frost coming out and supporting Mordaunt's rival Liz Truss, who has also, in the past 2 hours, won the backing of eliminated candidate Sunak Braverman in the race to number 10. So I'm delighted now to break this all down with the Fleet Street legend, associate editor of The Sun, Trevor Kavanagh. So, Trevor, wow, lots to unpack. Can we kick off with this utterly vicious but brilliant attack from Lord David Frost, a man I greatly respect, this morning? I mean, that was damning, wasn't it, against Penny Mordaunt?
Absolutely, and I think that it will have enormous resonance with the Tory party, for whom David Frost is something of a hero. In fact, there are quite a few people in the party who would have liked to have seen him leave the House of Lords and put his own hat in the ring.
Yeah, I would have.
I think that this is really serious for Penny, who has made an extraordinary rise from almost as much obscurity, really, as Kemi Badenoch, and has soared to the front without actually any interrogation of her previous life and what she's said in the past. So now she's coming under close scrutiny. She's been exposed by David Frost and others of having changed her mind, or at least her public stand on trans issues. And I think this will go down rather badly with those people who have offered her support so far.
What do you think of her, Trevor?
I don't really know her very much. I think that one of the things that has emerged in my experience of her, which is comparatively brief, I sat next to her at a spectator dinner. Is the only time that I really spent time with her, and she has this slight mannerism of being distracted, as if she's not really quite focused on what you're saying, or that she's semi-detached from the conversation. And that's the impression I've had of her in public as well. And it also chimes with what Lord Truss said about the fact that she doesn't really focus on the nitty-gritty of a very detailed policy, which is essential when it came to the Brexit negotiations. So, and also the fact that she's been accused of being absent for weeks or even months when she was trade minister. So all of these things will count against her, I think, as people start to really make up their minds in the closing days.
Trevor, the big issue the right of the party's got, of course, is that Kemi Badenoch has actually run a really brilliant and effective campaign. She doesn't have the experience, but she's got a lot more support from MPs than probably anyone expected. She's got a massive opportunity on Friday night and Sunday night to impress at these debates. Now, I'm a big fan of Kemi. I'm also a big fan of Liz Truss. You've got to admit, Trevor, speaking and public speaking and debating isn't a strong point for Liz Truss. So there's the potential that Kemi could actually outperform her over the weekend. If that happens, what does the right of the party do?
Well, like you, I've been a fan of Kemi Badenoch for quite a long time. I was one of the judges who picked her for Speech of the Year back in 2017 when she was literally a newcomer to Parliament. And I've been watching her progress ever since. It's been very, very quiet. She doesn't say very much, and she does so deliberately. She speaks very briefly, but she speaks incredibly to the point. And this is something which is very admirable and is admired by the fans that she's grown over that period of time. And what has surprised me over the last few weeks is that when you talk about the various candidates, the runners and riders, this is before they actually declared, you mention various people and then you mention Kemi Badenoch. And everyone says, yes, Kemi. Now, if she were to run, I would back her. And that's come across the range. It's an amazing phenomenon, the way that Kemi Badenoch has arrived from nowhere simply by speaking some home truths.
So what does Liz Truss have to do? Or do you think there is a potential, Trevor, that the right of the party could unite around Kemi rather than Truss?
It's very difficult to say that's likely, simply because she is so unknown, and if she were to win, it would be an amazing event. But I think that the party at large, the grassroots party, is quite different to those MPs in the House of Commons. They're looking for different things. They're looking for people who they feel they can look up to and admire and respect and listen to and think that they represent their views. Kemi Badenoch does that in spades, and she carries no baggage at all in terms of previous government decisions. Her hands haven't been dipped in the blood of Boris and Theresa May and previous prime ministers. So she is literally a straight-talking, clean-skinned politician who hits all the targets with a bullseye.
What about Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak? Trevor, where do you stand on both of them?
Well, Liz Truss, I think you've identified her biggest problem, which is her speaking mannerism and the way that she presents herself. She is also a former Lib Dem, quite a devout Lib Dem in her day. She is also a Remainer, a devout Remainer in her time. She spoke quite openly and vehemently in favour of Remain. She now claims that she was really acting under orders from George Osborne, but for many people that won't wash. It has washed for important people like Jacob Rees-Mogg and various other members of the European Reform Group, and that has helped her enormously. She is now amassing quite a lot of support, not least tonight, as you say, from David Frost. As for Rishi Sunak, I think he's paying a heavy price for his relationship with Boris Johnson, his failure to resign sooner, the fact that he introduced more taxes. OK, that was the price tag for Boris's flagrant overspending. But nonetheless, national insurance contributions went up, but the tax burden is now at record levels. Those are all factors which tend to cast doubts on his reputation as a right-wing Chancellor of the Exchequer.
And Trevor, finally, look, we know from history that the Sun loves to back a winner, and you have been there for many of those big decisions over the years. Do you have any idea if the Sun is going to back a candidate in this race?
Well, I think that a huge amount depends now on the television debates, and a lot of people could fall at this last hurdle. Also, some people might emerge as startlingly vote-worthy stars, and we need to wait and see. But we have some views, and you will hear about more of them in the coming days.
Fascinating stuff. Trevor, we'll keep in touch over the next week because it's going to be a big one. Trevor Kavanagh, Associate Editor of The Sun. Coming up, though, is free speech online dead? Now Elon Musk no longer wants to buy Twitter. Social media sensation Zuby explains why you should care about the battle between the billionaire and big tech. He's uncancelled soon. But next, they've both got starting 11s that are all white. So why has the virtue signalling BBC lashed out at the England women's football team, our brilliant lionesses, for their lack of diversity? What is that organisation about? I'm so annoyed about it. We're going to debate it with my superstar panel next. Plus, more of tomorrow's newspaper front pages too.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Let's return to tomorrow's News Tonight now on Our Media Buzz. Lots more front pages have just been delivered. First to The Guardian, that says the Environment Agency is demanding that water company bosses are jailed over serious pollution. The watchdog claims water firms' performance on pollution has declined to the worst levels in years. Not sure locking them up is the answer, but there you go. The Times reports how Liz Truss has enjoyed a boost in her, quote, bitter struggle with Penny Mordaunt, following public backing from Suella Braverman and Steve Baker that we've been telling you about throughout the show. The Daily Mail, this is interesting, puts Penny Mordaunt under the microscope. It leads with those comments from her old boss, Lord Frost, who said he had grave reservations about her abilities, and also says questions over her backers and lack of cabinet support. The Daily Mirror leads on fears over the upcoming heat wave as A&E doctors brace themselves for a surge of patients amid predicted 40-degree sunshine. The Met Office has given a danger to life warning. And Rebecca Vardy back on the front page of The Sun tomorrow, and Vardy bushfire terror. She was last night preparing to evacuate from her holiday home after being caught up in those bushfires there, and I very much hope she's okay, because I know what it's like, those bushfires in Portugal, my goodness. They just wipe through houses, so I hope the Vardys are safe. Back to the media buzz now with tonight's superstar panel, the Conservative Home columnist Emily Carver, Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey and the broadcaster Amy Nicole. This week, the uber-woke BBC indulged in a bit of race baiting, pouring a jerry can of petrol over the England women's football team's record-breaking victory in the first round of the Euros by calling out the squad's lack of diversity. Without shame, presenter Ailey Barber picked apart the Lionesses' 8-0 win by pointing out all starting 11 players and their 5 substitutes on the bench were, quote, all white. After doing so, they cut to former England footballer Alex Scott, who, accompanied by some sort of depressing orchestral music, asked young black footballer Deborah Nelson why the current crop of England stars didn't inspire her. Watch.
Was an historic 8-goal victory for England last night as the Lionesses secured their place in the quarter-finals. But all starting 11 players and the 5 substitutes that came onto the pitch were all white. And that does point towards a lack of diversity in the women's game in England. And it's something that Alex Scott has been investigating.
For me to see you speaking out about this current England team, saying how as a young black woman this team does not speak to you or inspire you, is so alarming to me. Like, why did you say that?
You need to feel like you can see yourself in someone in order for them to be a role model. You need to be able to feel like you can connect with them. And if someone doesn't have the same lived experiences as you, isn't of the same background as you, like, there's so many parts of someone's identity, and if you can't connect with at least one element of someone's identity, how can they then be your role model?
What rubbish. What a depressing way to look at the world, seeing colour over character and merit. I mean, as I wrote in a column for the Mail Online today, which is blowing up right now, claiming you can't be inspired by those of a different ethnicity is rubbish. Muhammad Ali, Jackie Robinson, Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan, Venus and Serena Williams, Simone Biles, to name just a few minority sporting icons. They're admired by millions from all backgrounds. The England women's team, by the way, has been graced by some of the best black talent in the game's history, including manager Hope Powell, who broke boundaries with a 15-year coaching stint after 66 appearances and 35 goals as a player. Alex Scott herself is the 4th most capped player in England's history, with 140 appearances, just ahead of ex-Arsenal star Rachel Yankee on 129. And all this coming from the BBC on the same day. Its list of top-earning talent was completely dominated by white stars. Can you believe the irony? Captained by Gary Lineker on £1.35 million of licence fee cash. Auntie's starting 11, there it is made up of Zoe Ball, Alan Shearer, Steve Wright, Fiona Bruce, Stephen Nolan, Hugh Edwards, Vanessa Feltz, Scott Mills, Greg James and Ken Bruce. Let's be honest, there's not a minority in sight. So perhaps the BBC, which not surprisingly declined to comment on this segment tonight, should sort out its own talent roster before trying to drum up racial tensions where there are none. Sean Bailey, I was so angry about this today because if the BBC wants to investigate some sort of systemic racism in women's football, then go off and find some evidence and prove it to us. But to me, this was just dog whistle stuff. They want to stoke division.
I'd go even deeper than that. They should clear out their own house first. To attack women's football in this way, when they have a much bigger problem in their own world, which they could solve but have made no attempt to, I think is disgusting. And, of course, football in general has been better about having people from all kinds of backgrounds involved. You only have to look at the England men's team to see the amount of representation there. But if they really wanted to be helpful, if they really cared for what's going on in the black community, they would ask about management. They would ask about people involved in the development of young players. They wouldn't just start throwing around racial epithets that make people feel bad. If you're a young black person, you sit at home now and the BBC have basically told you that women's football is racist, and that simply isn't true.
And Emily Carver, at the end of the day, right, a manager has to choose the best players on the day. I mean, what's the BBC suggesting? That we should now have race quotas for every team? And by the way, Emily, there's a lot of brilliant Team GB athletics teams, for example, you know, the athletics relay teams that are virtually always made up of entire ethnic minorities. No one moans about that because they are the best people for the team.
Exactly. And this actually makes me quite upset, this kind of reporting from the BBC, because I wonder why on earth they're doing it. Why can't they focus on the positives instead of constantly shoehorning diversity and problems of racism into absolutely everything that people are celebrating or enjoying? It's constant. And I do worry that they don't understand that they're actually stoking division in this way.
I think they do.
You know, and they talk about, you know, how this black girl talks about how she can't have a role model who doesn't look like her, who's had the exact lived experiences of her. That's like it's what they teach in the schools, that, you know, it's why they want to decolonise the curriculum, because a young black person can't possibly, what's the word? Empathise or look up to someone who happens to be white. This is absolute rubbish. Their love of football is what you can look up to.
And Amy, let me just put this to you. What was a particular disgrace about this? This was within the coverage of the Euros. So rather than waving the flag and celebrating our lionesses, they denigrate them because they're all white. This was a disgrace, Amy.
That's not at all what this report was about. Did you
just watch it?
Yes, I watched the full thing. That intro,
So did I.
that intro is very misleading, actually. This was a piece about the inequality in women's football, which is just a fact. Women's football is very, very white, and that comes down to because let me finish. It's more of a class issue here, and socio-economically, the disadvantaged women cannot access women's football, and that disproportionately affects ethnic minorities, because there are more
I'm just showing you it's not very white.
It is very white, because...
There's literally nothing stopping a young woman from kicking a football
Yes,
around.
there is. Yes, there is. There is chronic underfunding in women's football, which is not seen in the men's sport, which is why, in contrast to the men's team, which is absolutely as diverse as you could imagine, there are more opportunities.
But why not talk about funding? Why base the whole discussion on race from the start?
Emily, if you watch that report in full, they completely link to the fact that the solution for this is to increase funding.
Who are meant to be celebrating are all white. Amy, can I just
thought you loved women's sport.
I do.
And if you did, you would take this seriously, because
I do love women's sport, and that's why I want the BBC to get behind the Lionesses. Just by mentioning, because Amy, are you equally concerned about an underrepresentation of Asian players in the team? Because there seemed to be no concern about that.
The concern here is that disadvantaged women economically are not accessing women's sport, and that's why
that's not how they framed the discussion from the start.
Absolutely,
they led with the race element, which they know is divisive. Sean, can you speak to this?
Let me just say, look, to be clear, they led with the race element. They made it about race.
That's
and
the
hold
fact.
on, Amy, why this is important, right? I was born and raised in this country. I've been here my entire life. At no point in my existence has race been more divisive and more important. And I lived through the 70s and the 80s when we were having riots on the streets. And the BBC's way of approaching this particular subject and others is irresponsible. It is saying to black children, the whole of British society is out to get you. It is saying in this instance that women's football is racist, and it's not.
It's saying it's factually...
If the issue is about class, if the issue is about funding, let that be the headline.
Let that be the headline.
I agree, Sean, that there's also a time and a place. So, as I say, if the BBC genuinely feel, if they genuinely think, now I don't think there's any evidence of this, but if they genuinely believe there is this gross inequality in women's football, absolutely, go and put a news investigations team on it and properly look into it. But this,
that would be too difficult.
Oh, yeah, because this was the sports broadcast, Sean. This was within the coverage of the Euros. And you know what's meant to happen during a sports broadcast. We are patriotic and we get behind our team. And what, to me, the BBC was saying is because this team happens to be all white, when, by the way, previous England Lioness teams have not been all white, so it's not a systemic thing. Because this team happens to be all white, what the BBC was saying to me is that we are not going to back this team, and I think that's a disgrace.
Such a jump, Dan. That's ridiculous.
Listen, I'll say this. What they could have done is led with the fact this is about doing something about people from private backgrounds who don't have access.
Precisely what they did.
They didn't lead with that fact. They didn't do that.
They spoke about the makeup of the team.
And they could have done it in a celebratory way. Instead, they did it as a way to tell people off. But what's really disgusting is they haven't got their own house in order. Until they get their house in order, they cannot point fingers.
I mean, Amy, that BBC First 11, every single one of their top 11 highest earners white. Why aren't they investigating that? Why aren't they investigating the inequalities at the BBC if they care so much about diversity?
It's just a factual report on the inequality of sport and the contrast
answer me about the BBC.
funding to the men's game and the women's game.
Answer me about the BBC
but this is conflating
white rich
two
list.
completely
Well, they happen on the same day, Amy.
This report's really important because it points out
I'm
that the
asking
women's
you about,
game is a
we've discussed
second-class...
that. Amy, we've discussed that. I'm asking you about the fact that every single one of the BBC's top 11 highest earners are white.
But to say...
Why aren't they investigating that?
Maybe that's something that we need to look at next week. Maybe that's something we need to discuss.
Well, it happened this week. It happened on the same night. And let me tell you, because I hope none of you watch the BBC
make it right in
anymore. The BBC didn't cover that. They completely ignored it. So they're not talking about... So they're happy to talk about the fact that the Lionesses, the first 11 and the Lionesses are all white. They're not happy to talk about that all of their highest earners are all white. And as Sean Bailey says, that's something that they could change. They could change that overnight. And the fact is, the BBC is a snaring organisation that is filled with white, middle-class, champagne socialists who now want to stake racial division while they do nothing about it in their own organisation. I'm sorry, I'm so passionate about this because I just found what they did to the Lionesses a disgrace. I hadn't even thought about the ethnic makeup of the team.
But you should. You're passionate about women's sports. You should want to make it accessible to people from all backgrounds.
Do you know what?
And that's
I
all
want
this
us all to
report...
support the Lionesses, and that's what this should have been about. But look, it's time for me now to head over to New Zealand. But don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. There's no summer recess here on Dan Wootton Tonight, as you know. No, get ready to be transported to my beautiful homeland in the new trailer for the Lord of the Rings TV series Rings of Power, which showcases the most footage yet of the record-breaking Amazon Prime epic. Do you know, $1 billion splashed on this series. It stands to be the most expensive ever made, so I hope it's good. Look.
Darkness will march over the face of the earth. It will be the end, not just of our people, but all peoples.
I am sorry, but their time has come.
The past is with us all. The past is dead. We either move forward.
My precious, looks like it could be the TV show of the decade. Make sure you enjoy that breathtaking New Zealand landscape, though, while you can, because after a troubled production which was impacted by the country's suffocating and ridiculous COVID policies, Season 2 is relocating here to the UK. Good one, Jacinda Ardern. Look, a little bit of breaking news. Huge boost in the last few minutes in terms of the possibility of Liz Truss becoming Prime Minister. Emily Carver, I'll get your reaction to this, but this has been broken by Christopher Hope at the Daily Telegraph. He says the entire 60-strong European research group have now been told to vote for Truss to be leader. Mark Francois wrote to ERG members saying, as, quote, previously agreed, I do hope that all of our group will now feel able to unite firmly behind Liz. He said the ERG had backed Suella Braverman or Ms Truss, but had now agreed that if one got through, we would rowan behind that candidate, whichever one it might be. As previously agreed, I do hope that all our group will now feel able to unite firmly behind Liz. So this is a huge boost to Liz Truss tonight.
A huge boost. Now, I don't know how many of the ERG were backing Suella, so I don't know how many numbers this will add to her tally, but this is a boon for her, I'm sure. And it does look like we're going to be having that Rishi v. Truss standoff at the end, which I think is a bit of a shame. I like the idea of a dark horse coming through.
I know, but it's fascinating. At the top of the show, I said, look, the right needs to get behind one candidate. We love Kemi Badenoch. What Truss should do now is offer Kemi a massive role, one of the big roles of state, Deputy Prime Minister, Foreign Secretary, something really powerful, even Home Secretary, although we do like Prima Patel and Chancellor. Chancellor Sean Bailey says. Chancellor Sean Bailey says.
This does give you only 2 more years, though, so that's good.
Kemi only needs 2 years.
Sean Bailey, Emily Carver, do stand by, because coming up, crowning moment of the show, we're going to reveal tonight's greatest Britain and Union jackass. But first, is free speech online dead? Now Elon Musk no longer wants to buy Twitter. Social media sensation, rapper and podcaster Zuby returns next. First, though, quick look at what's coming up on Monday's show.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, as the race to be the last Tory standing continues with the contenders squaring off and another set to be kicked to the curb, I'll bring you the best analysis on the battle for number 10 from your favourite political figures and commentators. Plus, there'll be unfiltered opinion from best-selling author and columnist Lionel Shriver and my superstar panel, Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, senior reporter at the newspaper Benjamin Butterworth, and legendary political journalist John Sargent. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
But it's time now for Uncancelled, where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. Now, the dream of a social media landscape where free speech is allowed to thrive has been dealt a blow after Elon Musk backed out of an agreed £37 billion takeover of Twitter. On Tuesday, the social media giant sued the Tesla mastermind in a bid to force the deal through. Musk pulled out partially over the number of fake users, and while analysts believe his concerns were more commercial than ideological, these automated accounts have been known to spread misinformation and just part of Twitter's free speech problem. Now, Musk had vowed to reclaim Twitter, which accused him of pulling out of the deal because it, quote, no longer serves his personal interest. But he'd vowed to save it from liberal authoritarians and reform a space known for shadow banning, kicking out Donald Trump and censoring anti-Joe Biden content. But will this ordeal have drained his drive, meaning our best shot at free speech online is lost thanks to this battle between the billionaire and big tech? Well, let me bring in someone now who knows far more about social media and how Twitter works than anyone else, the rapper, author and podcast host Zuby. So, Zuby, break this down for me. What does this all mean? Is Elon Musk really not going to be buying Twitter? And surely the repercussions for free speech are huge.
Hey, Dan. Well, I'm not exactly sure how this is all going to play out. It looks like Twitter have shifted from not wanting Elon Musk to buy the company to trying to use legal means to force him to do so. From what I understand, I think it's most likely the case that it turns out that there are a much higher percentage of bots than perhaps they initially let on. So that would mean that the valuation of Twitter that he proposed was actually overvalued if they don't have as many real users as he was led to believe. That's what my gut tells me. I don't know all of the ins and outs, and I don't know how this is going to play out.
How bad for free speech will it be, Zuby, if Elon Musk doesn't end up buying Twitter? Because he was sort of my last hope, really, in terms of someone who could actually make a difference to what Twitter has become.
Well, I think, first of all, Twitter is not the arbiter of free speech as a concept. And I'd be very hesitant for any of us to put all of our faith and hope on one man to save Twitter, let alone to save the concept of free speech. Now, I think in terms of what would happen if he doesn't buy it is most likely they will just continue on the trajectory that they've been on. In essence, nothing would change. It would stay how it is now. There would be people getting censored and banned and deplatformed for silly things, often with no course of action, no recourse that they can really take. So I think that would continue. There might be some users who leave the platform or abandon it, but really I think it would be business as usual. Whereas if he were to buy it, I do think that there would be less pressure on people to play into certain narratives, and I think that some of the people who have previously been banned or suspended would potentially get their accounts back.
Well, indeed, Zuby, and I wanted to mention that finally because, of course, this is where it actually could have real ramifications for the next US presidential election. I mean, over the past 24 hours, Trump has come as close as he's going to get to officially confirming that he is going to be running for president. Now, if Elon Musk were to have bought Twitter, he almost certainly would have been reinstated on the platform, which would have been a massive boost for his campaign because we know how influential Twitter was in terms of him winning the White House back in 2016.
Yeah, well, I think Trump himself over the past couple months, I think he himself put out a statement saying that even if Elon Musk does buy Twitter, that he wouldn't return to it. I think, of course, he's got his own platform, Truth Social. And yes. I don't know. We're dealing with men who are not exactly the most predictable, whether you're talking about Trump or you're talking about Elon Musk. So
that's for sure.
I don't know either of them personally, so I don't know what they're up to.
Zuby, fascinating stuff. We'll keep across it. Thank you so much. But it's time now to reveal today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. My superstar panel are back now. Emily Carver, who's your Greatest Britain nominee?
Kemi Badenoch, not necessarily because I want her to be Prime Minister, but she's come from relative obscurity and given it a real good go.
Sean Bailey, your nominee?
Professor Robert Winston for stating that a woman is the presence of 2 X chromosomes in view of the fact that the Church of England couldn't identify a woman.
And Amy Nicole, your nominee?
Banging on about that again. My nominee is Kit Malthouse for being one of the few people to take this heatwave seriously and arrange a government meeting to discuss what we should do.
I'm going to go for Kemi Badenoch because, like Emily says, I don't necessarily believe she will be Prime Minister. I think she'd be brilliant, but my goodness, she is now a force in British politics, and that can only be a good thing.
She looks amazing for her age. She's 42 years old.
I know, I thought she was about 35.
I thought she was like 28.
Union Jackass time now. Emily Carver, your nominee?
Ismail Abedi, who is the brother of the Manchester Arena bombing, he's refusing to take part in a public inquiry against all the wishes of the law, essentially, and I think it's really, really scumbag.
Revolting scumbag. Sean Bailey, your nominee?
The BBC for the way they managed to turn the Lionesses' victory into a race row.
Oh, yes. And Amy Nicole, your nominee?
It's cheese passionate aficionado Liz Truss for failing to navigate her way out of a room, which suggests I don't trust her to lead the country if she can't even be trusted to lead the room correctly.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, look, you're over-exaggerating as ever. Look
oh, my
at
God,
this.
we need
look
to clip.
at it, look at it.
Thank you.
Thank
you. Thank you, everybody, for the questions. Very good to see you.
Oh, come on, Amy.
Really, can she use some high fives? You know, run along.
It was hardly a Biden moment.
You're grasping at straws there. Clearly, I'm going to go with Sean Bailey on this. The BBC for deriding our brilliant lionesses because of their race. That is racist,
didn't happen.
BBC.
It was done.
You are the race baiters.
You
Emily
are the
Carver,
race baiter. It was
done the
Sean
wrong
Bailey,
way at the
Amy
wrong
Nicole,
time.
fabulous superstar panel to end the week. Huge weekend of politics. GBNews is going to be covering it all, but of course you want to be back here Monday night, 9 p.m. for all of the big analysis. Headliners up now, though. Good night.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. We're still expecting a substantial increase in temperatures for early next week, but for the time being it's relatively cool, and there have been some showers for northern areas today. In fact, across Scotland, Northern Ireland, as well as Northern England, we've seen a lot of cloud cover, a fresh feel, and some of those scattered showers. Now, overnight, high pressure will continue to dominate in the south, so clear spells for much of England and Wales. The showers in the north ease away, but after midnight, the cloud will thicken across Northern Ireland and then western Scotland, with some outbreaks of rain returning here. Otherwise, it's a relatively mild night, but certainly not oppressive. We're looking at lows of 11 to 13 Celsius generally up and down the UK. And then a bright start to the day for much of England, as well as Wales. I think there'll be a spell of rain for central and southern Scotland first thing. That's spilling into parts of northern England during the late morning period. Eventually, that peels away into the North Sea. It's